Welcome to this afternoon's W.A.S.D session on how to win at Steam, and we'll also be discussing whether or not you still need to. Before we begin, I would like to, first of all, ask my beautiful guest next to me here to introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi everyone, my name's Paul Nadin, my pronouns are he, him. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Future Friends Games. Very proud to be representing them here today, these degenerates in the front row. And we started as a marketing agency, now we also offer publishing services for indie games. There were meant to be a couple of other people on this panel as well, but I'm afraid you're stuck with just me, so I'm going to try my best to give you insights into how we work, how we take our either agency clients or publishing partners through the process of just like how you take this black box of Steam that just seems like so weird and impenetrable, and you look at the back end and it's just horrifying immediately, like how you take that machine and make it start working for you.
Lovely, thank you. So we're going to, as Paul sort of alluded to, the topics that he has highlighted, we're going to go through. We're going to give some sort of tips and tricks on, how to win at Steam effectively. Be it in the lead up to launch, post-launch, et cetera, and we're also going to be talking about, some of the other platforms out there and making those kind of broader comparisons within that world. So I would like to start off by just getting one big, what you would say would be like the biggest top-line tip that you could give to anyone looking to get onto Steam doing it the right way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I guess, all right, I'm going to have to do a bit of work to turn this into a tip, but it's really the way that you should be approaching Steam, again, as an indie developer. It's really Steam works on the wishlist numbers. A lot of people may know that already, but there are mechanisms within Steam that basically once and again, this is like through research, through taking data from a lot of indie devs, it's always like the best guess scenario that we can take, because obviously getting information out of Valve directly isn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. But like people like Simon Carless, for example, you should all subscribe to his newsletter if you're interested in how this works more specifically. But a great thing for indie devs to think about is there's essentially tiers within the back end of Steam once you hit certain numbers of wish lists. If you want like something to aim for, really if you're like tracking your progress and you want the first milestone is really 10,000 wish lists, that's when Steam kind of wakes up and goes, okay, this is actually like a real game. It's not like shovelware. It's not like some hobbyist who's put like a Unity like tutorial up or anything. It's like, it's actually something that people care about. And from there, you end up with additional tiers where Steam starts going, okay, we're going to start pushing this game towards other people, using their very clever algorithms that they have. Like they push it towards people who play similar games, people who've wishlisted similar games. And ultimately, like this is how you take this cold, hard, unfeeling machine and you get it to start working for you. A lot of people who will tell you about how brilliant Steam is, there's a certain element of survivor bias in that because they've been successful, right? They've been successful on Steam, so you want to talk to them and say, hey, how are you successful? And they go, Steam's amazing. They did this, they did that, this happened, that happened. But really, it's like, what the side of it that they've seen is the side where the machine starts working for you. And that's when it starts feeling like the hurdles all go, you start running downhill, all the numbers are going in the right direction, you just feel like you're flying. And if you don't hit those milestones, especially if you don't hit that first 10K milestone, that's when it just feels like this just standing in front of a cliff, right? Because you just feel like there's no way to break that barrier down. So I think like maybe it doesn't work as like a tip, but I just think that like in everything you approach with Steam, like just having that core understanding of like that's how it works. It's either going to work for you or it's not going to do anything for you.
So what are some of the ways in which you can get this unfeeling machine to start working for you?
I mean, it really comes down to like getting those wish list numbers up, and it's hard because obviously a lot of that will happen outside of Steam. A lot of that will come down to your promotional efforts, your PR, marketing, influencers, all these kind of things, and the campaign as a whole the campaign as a whole, when you're trying to promote your game, the real like number one call to action, if your goal is to sell as many copies as possible on Steam, your number one goal should be, okay, how can we get this wishlist number going up quickly? You know, how can we start like utilizing those elements of Steam to our benefit? And some of that as well comes down to, obviously, the design of your page, the capsule image that you choose, the trailer. Once you're on there, it's all about, you know, for indie devs especially, creating that trust, making people feel like they're very smart and discerning for even being on your page in the first place. You know, you do all of these things to like make them feel comfortable, and then they hit the wishlist button, and that's absolutely bangarang. That's really what we want them to do. That's a topic that I could talk about for a very, very long time, but I don't know how long we've got on this panel, really. I mean, okay, all right. Since you said please, all right. This is a spiel that I often use about this. A lot of people who don't work in marketing and promoting things every day, their only experience of that is being marketed to, right? So what people think about when they think about marketing is, you know, campaigns that had a big effect on them. They think about, you know, campaigns for Marvel movies or Star Wars or whatever else Disney's, you know, pushing in front of us this week. And they start thinking it's like, okay, so we're going to have this like really cool teaser trailer, and it's going to start off, it's going to be like black screen and like this like exciting music and stuff, and then we're going to have like a big reveal, and we're going to talk about the story, and then they start thinking about building the hype. That's what a lot of people say. They talk about like building the hype towards launch, and we don't want to give away too many things too early because we want to get that hype at the end, right? And all I see when I look at that from an indie perspective is you've basically narrowed your window of being able to get wish lists from your entire campaign to just this one little bit at the end, because that's where you think your building momentum happens, where actually you should think about building your momentum throughout the entire course of your campaign. And I think that's a really fundamental thing that is easy to, you know, is easy to miss, because it's a bit counterintuitive, right? Again, because that's how we perceive marketing as kind of the opposite of that. But we don't worry so much about giving things away. When we put things out for indie devs, we often assume that the vast majority of people who see it don't even know your game exists. And it may very well be the only time they ever come into contact with your game. You know, everyone here knows that like there's tons of games coming out all the time. There's hundreds of releases every week on Steam. And the attention economy being what it is, you know, the Twitter timeline of just scrolling through, even something that does really well and gets a bunch of retweets, like maybe you've got like 3 seconds of someone's attention before they move on. And what you do with that 3 seconds is, what are you going to do? You're going to show a black screen with a bit of text fading in? That's not what I would do. So I guess that's that's getting a little bit more into like how to kind of conceptualize that. And then obviously another part of that is, if we're talking about, you know, we're talking about the mouse, we're talking about Disney Corp, they can buy volume. They can buy volume of eyes. Like what they do with their marketing budget is they go, okay, we want to put this in front of as many people as humanly possible that we think would even be vaguely interested. That's how you end up, you know, you've got adverts on the side of buses, right? Like what's the hit rate of an advert on the side of a bus in this hell year, 2022? Like it's nothing. But they've just got the money and they just want eyeballs on it, because they know, like in, you know, the awful marketing speak of like someone has to see your product like X number of times before they make the purchasing decision. So they just want you to see it, because if you see it, it feels like a big deal. And as indie developers, we don't have that option. Like I don't know how much it costs to put something on the side of a bus, but I probably can't afford it. So how do we get volume, right? We get volume by, I don't really like the term viral anymore, because I think it implies something that doesn't really exist now. But we do it by, you know, going to press sites like PCGamesN. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a lovely event. We do it by going to influencers, and increasingly we do it by going to more social platforms. Reddit's a great example. TikTok's huge at the moment. Like, I know some people react to it negatively, but if you're an indie dev who's looking to organically build a community, there's really nothing like it right now in terms of like just how many people you can reach without having to do the groundwork of building a follow account. It's totally on a different scale. That's another thing I could talk about for a long time, but I don't think we have time. But the point of those is the decision maker isn't there, the gatekeeper isn't there, the editor of the website who could write about your indie game, or they could put that same person on doing another Elden Ring guide. Please put them on doing an Elden Ring guide. I'm really struggling. But that's the point, isn't it? It's like you go to these social platforms, and it's like, okay, you go on Reddit, people have to upvote it, you have to get past like the mod team, which is, people are kind of scared of Reddit for those reasons, but it's not as scary as you think it is. There's a lot of nice places on there. But the point is, it removes that gatekeeper. It removes the decision maker of like the influence of the YouTuber saying, I could play this little indie game, or I could play this like huge release this week, which I know is going to get me a lot more kind of organic traffic. And building that grassroots community as an indie dev is, in my opinion, the number one way of how you can create a sustainable career as an indie developer. And that's what we really want. That's what we kind of work towards as a company every day. It's like that's the world that we want to live in, where people can make indie games and make that their job, and we can all live happily ever after. There's a lot more, but maybe we should.
I was going to say, we will have a Q&A section at the end, so if you really want to grill Paul on something in particular, then definitely don't be shy. Sort of bringing it back more internally to Steam then, are there things that we can optimize, thinking about things like tags, to kind of draw traffic internally towards game pages, and et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. And this is another huge topic. It's really important to consider. I touched on it before, but within Steam, we've talked about outside of Steam a lot, but within Steam, the place where you get to make decisions is on your Steam page. So really, once people are on your Steam page, everything on there reflects on you as a developer or you as a development studio. That means people are looking at this page and they're judging you. And then they're asking themselves, and then they're using that judgment to think about, okay, how much do I trust them to be able to make a game that I'm going to enjoy, right? And a lot of that is, I can't tell you how to do that because you're the people who are like super creative and able to make amazing things and able to make like really cool, interesting art assets and styles that are really going to like show the promise of your game and instill that trust in people that they're going to spend money on a game. Because the problem with being an independent, and I said this even when I used to work in like independent bars or like in restaurants, like in the kitchen, the problem with being an indie is you always have to exceed people's expectations. Because if they go in and it feels like just whatever, or it feels like not kind of what they expect, then they'll just go, oh, it's not worth my time. I made a bad choice by doing this when I could have gone for a safer choice with a name that I recognize and understand. There's a lot of them here, just down there, And a big part of that is understanding how people look at Steam pages. Again, like going back to the 10 seconds of black screen at the start of the trailer. The way people look at a Steam page, if we're going to the research with the eye tracking, they give you trailer a few seconds. They look at it and they go, oh, this looks quite cool, and then they scrub through it. We all do it, right? That's how we look at trailers on things. Like, oh, maybe it's just me. I don't know. But like, they look at the trailer, they look at it a few seconds, they go, oh, this looks cool. They scrub through it, which again, it just means first few seconds of your trailer, absolutely critical. It's got to make a promise. It's got to make a promise to say like, hey, this thing is cool. This thing is worth your time. They look over at your capsule image. They've probably seen it already. They click through to it. But again, it's all about selling the promise of the game. Professionalism is really important in this. Anything that looks, again, I can't tell you what art style to use or like how to create that or anything, but it's really about the professionalism of it and selling the game in a way that feels consistent with the game and with the trailer and everything. Because again, anything that looks kind of amateurish, you're really like setting yourself back in a way that's kind of hard to recover from. Then you got your capsule text. They'll scan that. Keywords in capsule text are really important. This is not the time to be naming characters, naming places that people won't understand immediately. This is the time to like put in those like big genre names that your core audience of people who are going to love the game. They just want something to grab onto, right? And if that is the term roguelite, platformer, strategy, all of these things that we like immediately understand. And that's when they start to get a sense of like, okay, is this something that is for me? And that phrasing is really important. Is this something that is for me, right? Because you will have early adopters who want to know everything about why your game is so original and unique and like what amazing idea that you had. But the majority of people, what they actually want, and again, especially with indies because it's about building trust, it's like they want to know that it's something that they like. They want to know it's something that they already enjoy, and then that really fun, like, unique idea that you had as a developer, that's just like the seasoning on top that makes it exciting, that makes it like a fun new prospect. But really, like, you should consider the foundation of your pitch as being like, you know, how can we dial in on the exact player that will enjoy our game, that will get a lot out of our game? You know, is it someone who enjoys action platformers? But we also have this kind of like, you know, romance dating sim subplot. I would say in that case, if you're trying to talk to people who like dating sims, you're missing the mark because they won't enjoy the moment-to-moment gameplay of being an action platformer. That's obviously just one example, but I think it kind of makes the point. And then at that point, if they've decided, okay, this seems like something that is for me, that's when they start scrolling down. That's when you want to have like loads more lovely visual things. Like Steam doesn't, you know, it doesn't do a very good job of like helping you build a page in that way. It pushes you towards just having a load of just boring gray text. We don't want boring gray text. We want lovely big GIFs. We want a lovely big banner at the top that says wishlist now as a call to action. We want a banner at the bottom that says, you know, join our Discord because, you know, the awful marketing term, the funnel, you know, you want to bring people in and close and have them follow along your community platform of choice. But really, again, it's about selling it in a visual way. It's adding more details and things, but really it's just about kind of either getting them to wishlist, getting them to join the community, and just reinforcing this idea that they're incredibly intelligent and savvy and sexy for knowing that your game is good.
Yeah, because I was going to ask a little bit about actually putting your Steam page together, and obviously you've listed, you know, GIFs and having that lovely CTA and you know, great copy and all of that kind of stuff. So are there any other tips that you can give for sort of trying to decide on what you should be putting into your page and the way in which you should be sort of looking to do it? Or
I think it's just steal ideas all the time. You know, just like go in, look at games that you like, look at games that convince you to buy them. You know, if you made an impulse purchase, go on the page and think about why did I do that? Like, you know, if you like that game, you know, I assume people like the games that they are making themselves. Like I can't say that, but if you think like, you know, what games are the people that we want to buy our game? What games are they buying, and what are they doing on their pages? Scale is obviously important there, because if you look at pages like AAA games, often they're terrible, but it's because it doesn't matter to them. You know, all of their work's like kind of gone outside. I'd say shout out to Laura, who works with us. Like, there's a couple of games we put out called Exo1 and Omno. If you wanna have a look at like what is possible to do in terms of visual style, like in that awful like gray text box, you know, just to get yourself like thinking outside the box a little bit. And again, it's to create that sense of professionalism. It's to create that sense, you know, going right back to what the top is. People are judging you on this stuff. So what you put on if you put stuff that's like really cool and like exciting and really sells the idea of your game really well in this box, then they're going to be like, oh, well, they can make a good Steam page, they probably make a good game, right? Like, it's the same. I know that it's not the same. I'm sorry, developers. But yeah, I guess that's the main like headline thing. Just steal. Just look at what other people are doing and
find ways to apply it to your own game in the way that is.
Yeah, in a way that obviously like still sells like the unique prospect of your game. I think like I could talk about other things, but it's hard, right? Like my job is just like knowing this stuff and looking this stuff up and everything. But if like but I don't have to make a game at the same time, right? So for people who work in like agencies or publishers or whatever, like they should be the people who are going like, what's new, what's next, what's the new opportunity? You know, there was a time where like, you know, people realized that you could trick Steam into letting you put a GIF on the page. There was a time before that, and now the thought of not doing that is just bizarre to me. Like, why would you not when you have that opportunity? But yeah, I think like if you're an indie dev, you know, you've got a million other things on your plate to worry about at the same time. I think like going down the stealing route is ideal.
Definitely, thank you for that. Thinking about, you know, say, you know, we've put everything into practice. The tags are great. We've done all the community stuff. We've marketed well, and the launch has been great. Or it's been, you know, it's been good, but it could be better. What are some tips that you would suggest for ensuring that, you know, your game remains discoverable and relevant after it's out there in the world, in the ether?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I need to re-emphasize how important wish lists are for this again.
Yes.
It's going to make a huge difference. Obviously, secondarily to that, like if we're talking about like post-launch, that first kind of 48-hour period is when Steam's going to make a lot of decisions about your game. Part of that is like how many people who they push to the page, what percentage of them do actually convert and buy it, like the first time they land on the page. That's huge. And again, that goes back to Steam page design, making sure that you're instilling trust in the people looking at it, making sure that you seem like a safe bet. It's like they feel like it's something that's for them, and that's why they're there. You know, first couple of days, a lot of people now, they do like the release window discounts. That's nice, right? But a bit of FOMO to get people in there. Pricing is obviously a very spicy subject because that comes down to like business models and everything. If you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I'd say that the way Steam works with sales and things, there's no bottom, right? There's no way that you can undercut the value proposition of Steam, because I believe the last time The Witcher 3 was on sale, it was like it was a $5. So what do, right? Like, like how can you possibly, as an indie dev, like provide that same value proposition? I would say now we're definitely seeing some evidence that when you hit like that kind of under £10 kind of area, which I think is like achievable for devs. Other people would disagree. You know, I think Mike Rose was meant to be on this panel. He's a strong believer that indie games should be pricing themselves higher. In my like personal opinion, I think all indie games should definitely price themselves higher, and we should just like move that Overton window. But the problem is me with my like awful business hat on, and that's just giving people opportunity to undercut you, and you just end up right back where you are. It's terrible that it works that way, but here we are, Hell World 2022. So like I feel like there's like now some evidence to suggest that once you hit that under £10, that's when you get more of those kind of impulse purchases. Pricing higher and having that launch discount allows you to then go into deeper discounts later on, which obviously, again, that's like a lot of people who wishlist your game, like they won't buy it immediately, but they will wait for a sale. Old research says around the 40% mark is what tips a lot of people. That might be different now. I haven't looked at recent numbers. It just seems to be all over the place what people do. And then you do get your visibility rounds post-launch as a developer. This is something a lot of people don't know about before they've made a game. Like you do have an opportunity to basically say to Steam, we've done a significant update. Please just give the game like just a little bit of a push. And yeah, like being in sales, being in themed sales, again, if you're making an action platform or being part of an action platformer sale, it's just another opportunity to be pushed towards people who are your exact audience. I don't want to get like too deep into this stuff because this is the kind of thing that like changes a lot from kind of moment to moment, and a lot of it will come down to how well your game's doing organically, how much your initial wish lists are like driving sales of the game. Sometimes just mad things happen Like you look at the game Slay the Spire. I absolutely love that game. Like it was at the start, it was a very typical indie release. But if you look at like the cycle of that game and what happened, it's just like they did what indie games normally do, which is they have the spike at the start, and then it goes down. You get the long tail, right?
Yep.
And if you're really lucky, you get a couple of bumps in the long tail, and then just suddenly goes, whoa, like what happened? You know, and there's different people have different explanations of what happened, but essentially they ended up in a position where they tipped the Steam algorithm back in their favor. I can think of like Among Us as another example of that, but the fact that I can only really think of 2 examples off the top of my head should really tell you how important it is to just have all your ducks in a row at the start. A couple of other things for indies, just like reviews can be huge. It's really, really important. Like if you've kind of done the work of community building, the thing you tell them on day one, like you sort of assume that they buy, you know, hopefully they buy the game, but after that it's like, please leave a positive review, please, 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 because there's thresholds within Steam, again, that once you get a certain amount of positive reviews, it even changes what it says. You might have noticed, like, you can only get overwhelmingly positive if you have a certain amount of reviews, things like that. And again, that's something who's just looking at your Steam page. If it says overwhelmingly positive, they're obviously way more likely to trust that. Other things, reviews can be really good. It's hard. It's really hard as an indie dev to convince, especially press, to give your game any kind of value judgment before they've played it. We might talk about demos in a bit. Demos are really important. But to give any kind of like value judgment to the game, just knowing that it exists isn't enough. Like they won't say, oh, wow, this is amazing. And if they don't say, oh, wow, this is amazing, it's not going to have a huge impact. But once they've played it, you know, post-launch, that's when you kind of get like your accolades and things. That's when you can start adding those little things in. You know, awards are really great for that. There's a lot of awards you can apply for that you can get before the game comes out. And it all just adds to this impression that, yes, this is something that very intelligent, discerning, sexy people buy. And you're very intelligent and discerning and sexy, so obviously you're going to buy it as well.
Thank you.
I feel like that was very rambly, but it's kind of, I just really want to emphasize, like, just building beforehand, like building that wish list number and making sure your page is right so people convert. You know, obviously, bug catching, I can't tell you how to do any of that, but like, you know, game-breaking bugs can hurt your reviews a bit. And obviously, engaging your community to get them to leave positive reviews can give you a nice boost. Those are the main headlines, I guess.
Thinking about kind of what you were saying about sales and about category sales, and I mean, when you go obviously onto the Steam store page and you have like different banners for different things that are going on for awards, et cetera, et cetera. Just thinking about the ways in which you can get your game as close to the front page effectively as possible. I want to kind of pivot into to thinking about events like Steam Next Fest, the Steam Game Fest, et cetera, and just how important those are for getting games under noses.
Yeah, have I mentioned wish lists yet? Have we covered that? No, right, okay. I'm going to talk about it in a different way, right? There was a global pandemic, right? Events like this kind of went away, and people went, well, what do we do now, right? And the first kind of year, obviously, you know, people, very ingenious people were like, well, let's do some online events and see what happens. Some of those online events had Steam features. You know, the early ones, like, they converted really well for wishlist. They gave people really great wishlist bumps, and since then, it's just become such a core of, like, the promotional strategy for indie games. You know, getting good placement in these events, and like there's so many third-party events with Steam featuring. Getting into those that are really specific about what it is that you're offering is amazing, because obviously suddenly you have curation on Steam, which is incredible for indie games, right? It's something that's like so hard for them to just like, you know, feel like you've actually been handpicked and given good placement. There's lots of ways to maximize that, making sure you have like the streaming set up on your page, or all things like that. Having a demo, a lot of these you need to have a demo, and then this all builds to something with Steam Next Fest. A lot of people don't realize this. I've seen quite a few developers. They go into the first Steam Next Fest where they have their demo because they think, oh, it's going to give us like good visibility. It's going to give us like a really good kickoff for our whole campaign. But unfortunately, what that means is you're going in with a lower number of wish lists because you're early on in your campaign. This is like a nice tip for you to go away with. If you just pick the Steam Next Fest that is as close to your launch as possible, or the last one before your launch, essentially, because that's when your wishlist number is going to be highest. That's when you have the best chance of being in the good positions within the Steam Next Fest, and then that's going to translate to getting a much bigger number of wish lists, which then mean you have more wish lists, which means then your launch goes better. And yeah, so that's really top tips when it comes to events. It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference, and it takes a lot of time to look these things up. Summer is going to be huge. Like this summer, in terms of events, it's going to be very long. There's going to be a lot of them. It's really hard to like keep on top of. But I'd say maybe if you can just work that little search into your weekly schedule, just to make sure you're keeping on top of everything that's been announced, and make sure you're keeping on top of what's available to you. Because again, there's not many things that will give you as much of a bump in terms of wish lists as being in those events. So try not to miss them.
Thank you for that. And we've spoken a lot about the things that you should be doing for Steam, and I'd just like to turn a little bit more to the things that perhaps you shouldn't be doing, or some of the big don'ts when it comes to cracking Steam, all that lovely stuff.
Comes to cracking Steam. This comes with the caveat that obviously your crazy idea can work, right? You can do something bizarre. Landfall games are a great example of this, where like they find like fun ways of like just putting stuff out in unexpected ways, and it can work for them, right? But I would say trying to come up with an idea that is within budget and no one else has ever had before, and will also be appealing to the audience, the direct audience that you're aiming for, like, is hard. And if it wasn't hard, other people would already be doing it. You might do it. You might be the one, right? You might be the one that comes up with the crazy idea that really works. But when people don't ask me as much as they used to, but like when people were very hot on like viral marketing, people were always like, how can we do something? How can we do like a big event that's going to make like this big splash? And like what can we do that no one else is doing that is going to like give us that edge and give us that boost? And it took me a long time to come up with a satisfying answer to that. But now I feel like I'm very confident and secure in saying that like if you want to do something that like not many other people are doing that's going to give you the best chance of success, just do the simple things consistently and well. That's it. Like, Twitter exists, TikTok is so hot right now, influence exists, press exists. But a lot of the times, and especially for indie developers, because they've got a million things to do, they've got to wear a million different hats, all this stuff, it takes time, it takes creative energy, but it's not rocket science. There's subtleties to it, and obviously like things change quite rapidly. But really what it comes down to is if you're just putting in that legwork, we call it the grind, right? We all play video games here. It's the grind just from day one, and you see it. It really reflects the grind as well. Like early on, you're not seeing your numbers go up that much. It can be really disheartening, like especially if you're in that like phase of game development where it feels like everything's falling apart and this goddamn game's never going to be finished and never going to come out. But just like pushing through that mental block and just being like, I've just got to put a tweet out. Does it have to change the world? No. Does it have to be something that I think 500,000 people are going to retweet? Absolutely not. Please don't even try and do that. Just put out something. Just be like, oh yeah, here's an environment from my game that I made. And you know what? You probably hate it. You've probably looked at it a million times. The sight of it probably absolutely disgusts you. But there's about 100 million people who might buy your game who don't even know it exists. They've never seen it. And you know what? You made it, so it probably is really good, right? You put that up and someone looks at it and they get what you're doing and they go, wow, that's really cool. I'm going to follow this game. And please, for the love of God, make it something that is like shareable. Like that's the key with this kind of social stuff. But really, like, I think everyone knows like what the core components are. I often refer to it as the small wheels that make the big machine turn. The big machine is Steam. What makes it turn is wishlist. The small wheels are the things I mentioned above, like among others. It's things like your community. It's things like your socials. It's press. It's influencers. It's these crazy random things that happen during development. But yeah, I think that's really like my top tip that I really wanted to underline. Like if you're aiming to like just set yourself up for the best chance of success. So it's always a roll of the dice, but there's a way that you can make the odds in your favor. Definitely. I've actually talked so much that I've kind of forgotten the original question that you asked me.
I've also forgotten the original question that
Excellent.
I asked you. So we are going to move forward. So we were talking about the sort of biggest don'ts when it comes to...
Sure, okay. Yeah, so I guess that's my biggest don't. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? It's another awful marketing term, but it is true. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You do the simple things consistently and well. Don't think that every post has to go viral. Don't think about it that way. More don'ts, I think I mentioned it already, but things like your trailers, having that black screen at the start, setting it up in the way, having logos of companies, all of these things that are just going to make people lose patience and scroll past because there's infinity plus one other things they could be looking at on the internet. And I think that feeds into as well assuming that the people that you're talking to have been following along. Because I think I mentioned already, like the vast majority of people that see anything you put out, it's going to be the first time that they've seen it. And that goes again, it's like, so don't worry about like how boring you think something is, or don't worry about like, if you showed something 3 months ago, that doesn't mean it's like dead content now. It just means you can recycle it. Cycling through platforms is great for that as well. I think like psychologically that helps a lot if you're kind of thinking like, okay, we're doing a tweet and then we're hitting Reddit and then we're going to Imgur and then next week we're going to make a TikTok. And with Reddit, there's different subreddits, and we're also gonna try and like outreach to this influencer that we know plays games, like the ones that we've done. We're gonna give them an opportunity to maybe play this new version of the demo that we've been working on. All of these things that then you can repeat stuff, and you don't even have to repeat stuff on the same platform that you've already put it, but then you also should repeat stuff on the platform that you've already put it on. And suddenly you go from thinking, oh my God, what are we gonna like put in front of people that's gonna encourage them to wishlist the game and ultimately buy the game, but you end up in a situation where it just feels like it's flowing a lot better and you have a lot more to say. And you get a lot more kind of feedback as well, right? Because you're just going to where the players are. So yeah, don't worry about repeating yourself. Don't assume that people are following along on like a marketing journey with you. Those are two huge ones. And obviously, just also be a decent human at the same time. I don't like. It's terrible that I have to say that, but like on socials, like don't make a fool of yourself. But you won't do that by just talking about the game. So just talk about the game.
Thank you for that. I have just looked at the time, and I didn't realize that we'd gotten to this juncture where we're very, very close to the end. Time flies when you're having fun, always. But before we do sort of wrap up the main element of the talk, I do want to ask about where Steam kind of sits within the broader realm of competition. Epic Games Store has propped up in the last couple of years, itch, more specifically for indies as an alternative. So with these kinds of alternative storefronts out there, how important is it to be on Steam now relative to where it was a few years ago? And are these kind of alternatives, really solid alternatives, or is Steam like really still the king here?
I'm glad you asked. If your goal is to sell as many copies of your game as you can, Steam is where you're going to do that. And that's the short answer to that question. You mentioned itch. I absolutely love itch. I think it's fantastic. I think that just the environment of it, the community, it's amazing. I think it's a great way like into the industry for people as well. Like it's much more easy to kind of get on that ladder than Steam is. So I say it absolutely has a great place for indie developers. But again, if your goal is to sell as many copies as you can, that's Steam. Like there's, I wish I had another answer for you, but that's it. And I think that's not necessarily the worst thing. I could criticize Steam a lot, and I do regularly. But what it offers indie developers is it gives you the biggest lever that you can pull as an indie dev. Platform support will do more for you than anything, unless you have like millions to spend on adverts or advertising and marketing. Platform support will do more for you than anything. Other platforms, you're just at the mercy of them. You're at the mercy of their curation. You're at the mercy of, one person brought you in and they absolutely loved your game and it's their favorite ever, but then they move on to a different job. The new person comes in, they don't get it. You don't get anything that you were promised by that platform. Nintendo Switch, absolute nightmare. Your game comes up, it's there for 5 minutes and it's gone. But on Steam, again, wishlist. Wishlist is the thing. Like when I talk about this big lever that you can pull, you can put the work in, you can do your campaign, you can put your game in front of as many people as you possibly can, and if you pull that great big lever on that horrible black box and you get it working for you, there's nothing else. There's nothing else that you can do that will have as big of an impact. That's what it comes down to.
That's brilliant. Paul, thank you so, so much. If everyone could give Paul a big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for putting up with me. I swear I was trying to be brief.
No, this has been fantastic. Do we have time for a couple of questions? Yes? Fantastic. Brilliant. So anyone who has questions? Yes, we'll start with you. If you could head up to the microphone that is in the middle of the room, just behind you there. Project nice and loudly into the to us. If anyone else does have a question, then please do go and line up behind the lovely gentleman there. We won't have time for lots of them, so do get up quick if you do have a quick one.
I'll try and be brief, I swear, and I'll hang out for a bit afterwards as well if we don't get to you. Go ahead, mate.
So, hi. First of all, thanks so much, Paul. That was a really interesting talk and really useful. I actually had quite a specific question about early access and how this kind of factors into the machinations that you're talking about. Like, hypothetically, let's say that you're in a situation where you're reaching those wish list numbers and you're kind of hitting your goals, but you're thinking about doing early access to kind of get some more money in to extend that development time. If this is the case, like, what would you recommend in that situation, and how does it affect the machine, I guess?
Sure, yeah. Early access is obviously an amazing tool. Again, Aaron brought it up as maybe a topic for this, but for time's sake, we left it out, again, because it's huge. I'd say my short answer to that is, yes, that can be great. It doesn't mean that you've totally blown like your launch on Steam, because they do treat early access in a different way. That's something that you'll be able to look up exactly how that works. I will say the thing that I think people don't consider is early access adds so much work to what you're already doing. If you think about, as I talked about, the promotional campaign trying to reach as many people as possible, post early access, you're still doing that, but now you're talking to another audience as well, who are the people who bought in early, and they're the people that trust you, and you really need to repay that trust. And the way you do that, unfortunately, again, the answer is really about consistency, which is obviously extremely difficult in game development, to be able to consistently hit milestones that you set, consistently communicating with your community. I'm saying consistently, on purpose rather than just all the time, because it's much more important that your early access community know when to expect you to say something. And like I said, it adds a lot of work, it adds a lot of stress. If it's something that makes sense to you in terms of a business case, it can be absolutely great. But I say don't underestimate how much extra work it is speaking to that community, hitting those milestones, and promoting your game for launch at the same time. I spoke to someone, oh my God, I'm trying to be brief, I'm so sorry. I spoke to someone the other week who wanted to do a Kickstarter and early access, and I was kind of like, something that never occurred to them is when I said to them, like, you can absolutely do that, but just bear in mind then you're talking to 4 audiences. You're talking to your Kickstarter backers, you're talking to your early access community, you're talking to people who have heard about your game, but maybe wishlisted it, but maybe need a bit more convincing, or they're waiting for a sale or whatever. And then you're talking to people who have never, ever heard of your game, ever. And, that's 4 is harder, right? 4 is more than it would be otherwise, so. There's a few things to bear in mind. Like, I'm sorry, early access could be a whole talk in its own, but I hope that's useful to you.
Yeah, that's so great. Thanks so much, Paul. That's really
awesome.
insightful.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Hi, Paul.
Hiya.
Thank you. Thank you for today. I'm a marketing student who's here representing an indie game, and I'm marketing for it because I absolutely love it. My wish is to keep marketing the game for a decade from now. So my question is there sort of like an inevitable graveyard for a game, that games do eventually have to die in terms of, working towards promoting it, or isn't there one?
Well, first of all, welcome to the dark side. We're very happy. Very happy you chose us. Lifetime of games, I don't know what game you're working on. I'd say for a typical single-player game, the life cycle of, like, you're going to basically finish making money out of it after, like, 5 years. 5 years at a stretch, right? Like, really after that kind of 3 years, that's when you start looking at maybe getting involved in, like, the bundles and that kind of thing, which is another great tool for indie devs, especially, if you need that injection of cash, like, for your next game. Don't do the bundles too early, obviously. If you're a game that relies on community, like, absolutely, there's a million and one things that you can do. I'd say as an indie developer, post-launch, it becomes a lot more difficult to create really kind of any sense of excitement around the game, because, the game's already out. It's already available. If people want to play it, they can. So your message going from, hey, there's this really cool game that is going to exist and you will be able to buy it, going from that message to, hey, this game exists and please buy it. I mean, I'm sure you do marketing, those two things are very different. So, yeah, sorry. If I knew more specifics about the game, I could talk your ear off for hours, but...
No, I like the 3 to 5 years kind of benchmark. Yeah, thanks.
Awesome, thank you.
So what I will say very quickly is the last few questions. Paul, if we could give the most condensed version of your answer possible.
I promise I will try.
It's okay. But you are going to be around after, so if you do want the longer version of it, then please do ask Paul afterwards as well.
All right.
Yes.
Hi. I am an indie game developer developing a brand new game. I was wondering, in terms of other funding sources, in terms of other funding sources such as Kickstarter and early access, what about other avenues such as going to an investor directly? Mm-hmm. What are your advice in terms of picking up investors?
Sure. Super condensed version. Investors is just kind of about who you know. There are places that will invest in your game without being as hands-on as a publisher. Kowloon Nights is one that springs to mind. Superhot Presents is another great one. There are also opportunities for investment directly from platforms. Game Pass has been a really, really great option for a lot of indie devs. As far as I'm aware, they're still handing out money. It looks like maybe Sony are getting their feet into that as well, but we'll see what happens. That's my super condensed version. Unfortunately with investors, it's really about who you know, but I hope there are options. Maybe we can talk more about it afterwards.
We can talk about this more afterwards. Thank you for your question.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Hi, Paul. I'm beginning to make some indie games myself, and I was wondering if there are any genres that you recommend that are beginner-friendly and also catch people's eye in the whole Steam machine thing? Or is that a really controversial and open-ended question?
I will be brief. There are genres that do much better on Steam than others. For example, anything that's very like numbers-heavy strategy, think like Factorio, things like that, they pick up a lot more organic wish lists like within the system. So people will just see it on Steam and they're much more likely to wishlist it, which is better for you. Things like, you know, I love point-and-click adventures. They're very difficult to gain any momentum on Steam, so there absolutely is a kind of gradient there. I would say the information is available, like definitely have a look on Google, but really, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be super brief. Like the best game that you'll make is one that you can really invest yourself into. I'd say like if you don't enjoy the game, it'll never be good, right? Like if it's not something that you enjoy, how will you ever know if other people will enjoy it? So I'd say, and I mean especially, it's like I can't quite. I feel like you've got a few years ahead of you before you need to worry about it. I would say like just do what you love, man. Honestly, because that's the main reason to work in games is because you love it and you just want to work in games. So
Okay.
thank you for your question. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks for answering.
Yeah, no worries, man. Cheers.
Lovely. And that's all we have time for. Thank you, everyone who came out today, everyone watching at home. Paul, thank you once again.
Cheers, man.
And have a fantastic rest of your event.